Hi, everyone. Get ready for the How I Raised It podcast, the show where you get an inside, unfiltered look at how real entrepreneurs raise capital for their businesses. I'm your host, Nathan Beckert, and today's episode is with Bunim Laskin of Swimply, which is kind of like an Airbnb for swimming pools. You can reserve your neighbor's pool. It's a really cool concept. I love it. He's raised capital from some of the top VCs as well as big name angels like founders of Airbnb, of Instacart, Lime, Pinterest, and many others. So we're going to get into how he did that. If you are tuning into this podcast to learn how to raise capital for your business, I've created a super valuable free welcome package for you. It includes a list of 2,500 investors who don't require a warm intro, plus 200 of the most important questions that investors are going to ask you. So this will really help you prepare for your own fundraise. To get instant access to this, please click the link in the first comment. And while you're there, would you please leave us a nice comment, what you like about the show, a question, and whatever it is. We really appreciate that. Last but not least, if you enjoy this conversation and think someone else would too, please share it with them and hit that subscribe and bell and everything else to get all our latest episodes. Thank you so much. Sit back and enjoy the chat with Bunim.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Bunim Laskin of Swimply coming to us from Los Angeles. How's your day going?
It's doing great. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Thanks for being here. Let's jump right into it. What is Swimply?
Absolutely. So Swimply is an online marketplace where people that own a swimming pool that don't use it often, but spend thousands of dollars maintaining it, can open it up to their communities, and families, groups of friends nearby can just reserve their pool by the hour. So you can think of us as like a Airbnb, but for swimming pools.
Yeah, cool. What was the backstory? How did you come up with this idea?
I grew up in Israel until I was 15 years old. My family moved to New Jersey. At the time, we had 11 children in my family, so I was the oldest of 11. I was around 20. I was 15. We had 11 kids in my family, so we were pretty intense. And then when they moved here, I went to high school in Miami Beach that year. So I wasn't really familiar with how confined to their house they were. In Israel, it's at least where we were living, it's a very outdoor experience. Like at 6 years old, you're pretty much autonomously like walking the streets, and you're not really that limited, I would say, to your particular street or block. So I went to high school in Miami Beach, and when I graduated, I went straight to Israel. I was studying for 3 years for a Talmudic law bachelor major, and then ultimately summer 2018, my bad, I came home, and because my mom had her 12th kid. That was a couple of years later. And the combination of me being home and the new baby was quite intense. And there was no idea of like just walking to the park. Like you needed a car, and we were 14 people in my family, and we were just pretty much all limited to the house. And we never really had means to travel or go to camp. So it was pretty intense. And so to the point where I went to my neighbor who owned the pool, and she had it for a couple of years, and she was a sweet lady, but she figured if she let us use it once, all of us would live in her backyard pretty much 24/7. Yeah. And so she was pretty protective over it. But I offered to pay her, and she said, instead of paying me, why don't you just help me with the expenses? And so we covered 25% of her monthly expenses. In exchange, my family would be able to like escape into her backyard when her grandkids were not over. When the rest of the block noticed that the loudest family in the block was being accommodated by this host, they were intrigued. And within a week and a half, she made a group chat, and she had 5 other families, 6 families total, each paying her 25% of her expenses. So when something that was costing her money was generating 150% of the costs, and that was giving her a profit, that was my eureka moment. That, obviously you have a small percentage of the population that owns all these incredible spaces. You have everyone else that desires them, but either doesn't achieve that level of economical privilege, or geographically it's not possible for them to expand that way. And so what if I can just democratize these spaces and open it up to the communities? I'd be generating revenue that otherwise would not exist, and I'd be giving people experiences on a local level that would improve their quality of day-to-day life. And so I dropped out of school. Decided I'm not going to go back. I went on Google Earth. I found 80 swimming pools I knocked on 80 doors, spoke to all 80 hosts, 80 pool owners, I should say. 4 of them agreed to, at the time, this was still in 2018, be on my hotline. Obviously, you can't put up a website that quickly. And so I got these 4 hosts to list on Google, all their information on Google Sheets. And then I'd put out flyers around town. Hey, looking for a vacation in Lakewood, New Jersey. Give me a call. And so people would call me, and then I'd call the owner, and then I'd call you back and coordinate availability, charge people over Square, and then deliver checks bi-weekly to the hosts. And it really had a really quick, phenomenal impact where like it just grew like incredibly quickly on a hyper local level, because when you book a Swimply, you're always with friends or your family. And when you're done, you're sharing where the experience itself. And so people are telling people about it. They're posting about it on social media. And so those 4 pools grew to close to 100 in that one summer. And we did like 30 grand in revenue. And for me, that was it. And so like I was sold on the concept. We went from there. Ultimately, we raised a pre-seed round a couple of months later, $1.2 million, and launched Swimply in 2019.
And then was mom disappointed that you're not becoming a rabbi? I'm assuming the study of Talmudic law is on the path to becoming a rabbi.
Yeah. So for my community, your career choices really are to either like study Talmud forever and become a rabbi, or if you're like kind of rebellious, you can like go into real estate. And if you're really rebellious, you're going to like a proper college and you're like looking for like a career in like, I don't know, law or medicine or an accountant. So when I wasn't doing any of those things and I was starting a business, launching a startup, that was a learning curve and across the board. They were definitely pretty disappointed at first. They would have been disappointed if I would have chosen to go into real estate or college. They were disappointed and thought I was crazy by actually choosing what I ended up doing.
That's funny. Not to get too off topic, but is that the Orthodox Judaism?
Yeah. Ultra-Orthodox. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So interesting. And then I assume kind of where you left off with that story, I assume 2020 hits and, things just start to go crazy because everyone needs to get out of the house and right. I mean, perfect tailwinds for your type of business as pandemic hits or what?
Yeah. I mean, so COVID was a bit of a double-edged sword for us in a way. So we raised $1 million. We launched Swimply in 2019. We're still operating, like there's no in-house engineers. So I bring on a co-founder. He was the former CEO of Twillory. He had a lot more experience, I would say, in like just building up an organization. This was my first job ever. So I never made $1 outside of Swimply, still true to date. And so he became like my bigger brother, my older brother, and the concept. We Swimply grew, I think like we grew pretty quickly. Like even in 2019 before the pandemic, we went from like 30K to like 300K in revenue. And those, and again, all organically, just essentially just people just telling people and people going on Swimply and not liking the search results. And so they tell their friends that have pools to list their pools so they can book it from them. And so it's pretty powerful that way. But a big part of our revenue came from pool parties and photo shoots, swimming lessons, things we didn't even forecast. It was built for families. And so we saw these other use cases coming on board. And so we started like pivoting quickly, pricing wise and product wise, to accommodate these different flows and these different needs. And then right when we finished building it, like, so it's ready for families and so it's ready for larger groups and parties. Like it was built for like 5 to 7 people and 40 people were trying to book a pool. That's when COVID hit. So like right when we built it for start hosting these larger groups, most of it was decimated. So it was around like pool parties were around like 40% of our bookings. And we just lost that entire use case when COVID hit. And we lost like 15% of our hosts. So COVID seemed pretty dire at first. And then we really leaned into making the company the perfect contact-free escape. And we just started emailing journalists and offering them the perfect contact-free escape. Yeah. And we also aired on SharkTank. So between the journalists, and we told the journalists, hey, we were on SharkTank and we're the perfect contact-free escape. And if you guys want to sign up for this pretty wild experience, we got a lot of takers and we just blew up we just got a ton of press just around that perfect contact-free escape, which even though we didn't get any of the larger GMV bookings, we did get a whole lot of families to start trying us for the first time.
Let's go down that path for a minute, that rabbit hole of Shark Tank. So talk about that. How do you get on Shark Tank? First of all, I don't think we've had anyone else who's been on Shark Tank. So how did you get on it? How did it go? Did you get a shark? And any tips for people who want to get on Shark Tank? Or
so they wrecked us, like totally smoked me on the show. They actually reached out to us. They're just looking for I think pretty intriguing concepts to put on their show, and we were obviously a cool concept and young founder and probably good for television and whatnot. And so, but they did think we were out of our mind throughout the entire process. So they reached out to us, and then you have to send in a video and once you about your company, pitching them, they want to make sure your TV ready. So once they like you and they say you're on to the next level, every week you're meeting with their producers and they're training you about the pitch, that story, hey sharks, and then that entire part's scripted. The rest of the show is not scripted, but that first pitch, they're micromanaging a little bit. So you're meeting with them every week about the words that you're gonna open up with, your offer, how much money you're asking for, and then the props and all that stuff. We went pretty all out. We we built a pool on set, and we had this whole curtain and the whole big spiel, as you would say. We got Alicia Keys' music video people to build our set over there. And so they were excited about having us on air. They did, we knew we weren't getting a deal, for being totally transparent. At that point, I think we had $100K in revenue, and we were claiming a $6 million valuation.
Okay.
Which, if you're in tech and you understand scalable solutions, then that's not so wild. But if you're on Shark Tank, where they're mostly used to cookie cutter businesses, it's definitely much more uphill. And so we kind of understood that. They asked us to lower it. We weren't going to, because we already raised $1 million at that valuation. So we couldn't if we wanted to. And so we knew we were going to get smoked. And so we pretty much just did everything to make it a good episode, so they air us. And so happens to be, we got it's 2 hours, and they aired 8-9 minutes.
Okay.
Most of the time, most founders that don't get a deal would tell you oh, we did a lot better job. They cut out all the good parts and they just made it look bad. By us, it was very intense and really aggressive. They actually made me look much better than they could have, in the way they put it. I was pretty chutzpahdik, as you would say.
I don't know what that means, but
chutzpahdik is it's some people will know what I mean. It's I just say I had a bit more audacity.
Full of chutzpah.
Yeah, chutzpah. Okay. Yeah, then they probably forecasted. And so a lot of really unique conversations, specifically with me and Mark Cuban, that were pretty awesome. But we didn't get a deal, but it actually aired March 13th of 2020.
Oh, wow.
They let us know 2 weeks in advance that it's going to air. So we have to get everything prepped up from
dial up your servers. Yeah.
And so, and we're no strangers to shutdowns either. We had all these spikes that shut us down. And so we had to really prep for that. And we aired March 13th of 2020. That's also when most lockdowns went into effect.
Yeah.
That was a big bust on that end. But we did get it did get us a lot of obviously awareness. We didn't get a lot of bookings immediately, but we did get a whole lot of people signing up for the wait list and stuff like that, and just joining, but not actually converting, because owners were at that point in time, nobody knew what was going on and what the environment would look like. And so it was very interesting, but we were able to use that momentum and leverage it later with the journalists and people saying, oh, I heard about that on Shark Tank. And so we had that initial touch point.
Fun.
We just capitalized on it later.
That's fascinating. Oh, fun stuff. Okay. Let's go to the angel round and pick apart that one a little bit. Was this just friends and family, or how'd you kind of put that one together? Go ahead.
Totally. So that one it wasn't friends and family, I would say. Most of the word startup doesn't really exist where I come from. I learned the term startup from one friend I knew that left the community, and I asked him about hey, I'm thinking of making this available everywhere. How do I even go about that? And he kind of educated me on most of the phraseology. He actually told me that he's shutting down his startup. I have an engineering team that you can take over now that you.
Wow.
And so that was kind of how I got my hands on engineers and just got really hyper obsessed with product, just managing them. But where I come from, you had to educate. There was money around to like pitch people, but there was most people were not used to high risk investments or tech or anything like that. They're more investing in real estate than more conventional businesses. And so that was pretty tough. I'm going to say I probably pitched like 100 people. Eventually I got my first check from a Harbor Group, which was a real estate company that saw us as a good partnership to monetize their assets even further. And so once we got their backing, I was able to use that initial, I guess, validation to just keep going, just networking like crazy. Went to every single possible event I can go that I knew there would be people that were open to investing. And eventually just from Harbor Group, we got another real estate company, Phillip Capital, that also invested another $250,000. And once I had those two, the rest just came from other high net worth individuals.
So you're going around in New Jersey, New York area, going to pitch demo days, pitch competitions, whatever you could kind of squeeze your way into, basically?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say I was as fancy as going to like demo days or pitch. I was literally just meeting people like, hey, this is my idea. Do you know anyone that would be interested in hearing me out? And we have like Shabbat meals every Friday night, and my custom, like you like have you get together with other families and stuff like that, and you just spend Friday night together. And so I would use those as networking events to introduce me to more people that would want to hear me out. And so one by one, and every person that rejected me, also, I made them introduce me to somebody else. I'm like, hey, you must know people, even if this isn't for you. And so really pretty much just wasn't shy about it. Just drove the world crazy.
Well, your concept is easy to understand, right? I mean, it's a simple, I think you don't have to be in tech or software or, to understand what you're doing. It's pretty straightforward. Like it's an easy thing to grasp pretty instantly. So that probably helps, right?
It definitely helps. It doesn't help that the investors at the time never saw themselves as end users, right?
Yeah. I can understand that. We had, not to go off topic, we had Neighbor.com on the show, which rents out people's garages, right? Yeah. Kind of same concept. And they've raised a bunch of money, and on Andreessen Horowitz and others. So, you're definitely seeing your model kind of blowing up, which also helps probably, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on. Unless there are any other stories about the angel round, I guess let's talk about the next round would be Series A.
Yeah. So our next round was, 2020, we grew pretty aggressively. So we went from like 150K in revenue to like a few million. And then again, pretty much all organically. And then, and through press and word of mouth. And ultimately, and also a really cool thing we discovered in 2020 was owners were doing their own marketing. We're one of those like really unique marketplaces where the supply side is marketing to their own communities and neighbors. And so a lot of people were just using us as a transaction and scheduling platform and generating revenue, which is really powerful. And so we grew, we came up for air, no pun intended, and we had a couple of term sheets for us. So that part was pretty, I would say, seamless almost. And then we raised $10 million from Norwest. And the company was still just me and my co-founder and this team in Ukraine. And I was doing all the customer support ultimately. And then we just used that to begin building the organization. So we brought in our first head of engineering to bring engineering in-house, start building a growth team. Our first employee was actually a VC that we pitched, whose fund didn't want to write us a check, but she was really passionate about what we were building. And so she jumped ship to join us as our employee number one. And she just built out the entire internal operational organization from customer support to HR.
That's cool.
Heartbeat of the company.
You raised $10 million Series A. You had you and your co-founder and a team in Ukraine, and you raised from pretty well-known VCs. Did the VCs like object or have any issue with you having this like offshore team in Ukraine as your team? Was that an issue?
Yeah, it was actually, I'm going to say that there were a couple of key concerns with investors had. One of them was the fact that none of us were technical.
Yep.
So that was definitely an overlap. So to some VCs, I was a non-starter. To some VCs, it was really, it was a solvable solution.
Yeah.
Especially at our stage with our product market fit. if we were in that product market fit, we think it would have been that sentence across the board. But because we had pretty powerful product market fit, it seemed like a cavity that we could fill. And so that was ultimately the story that we told.
Yeah, that makes sense. On the Series A, I am looking at something on TechCrunch. You had a bunch of kind of high profile angels too. Poshmark founder, someone high level, Airbnb, Ancestry, etc. How'd you kind of wrangle in these, name brand angels?
Yeah. So when we were doing the Series A, that was my second time to San Francisco. And so I slept on a friend's couch for like 2 months while we were just dealing with all those term sheets and the negotiations and getting that first one. And then now it just never, like the famous term, you either get none or more than one. Right. And so during that process, I was just driving the world crazy again for advice on the whole thing. And through that process, I connected with somebody who was nice enough to connect me with the founder of Poshmark, who since became Manish Chandra. He's since become like probably my closest mentor and advisor, I would say. And so he helped me navigate that, and just pretty much the same strategy with those Shabbat meals, getting to those initial angels, using just driving the world nuts as far as introducing me to people that I can become a sponge with. And that was, I think, like probably the most useful thing for me at that stage. And since the start, is just not being afraid or shy of asking for advice and asking favors and getting people to introduce you. And it's shocking how willing people are to help you and support you if you're doing something that they believe in and you're doing it in a way that they're proud to support. And so,
yeah. So you're out in San Francisco holding, Shabbat meals and kind of inviting people to these. And I'm assuming it's not just for Orthodox folks, because Manish Chandra doesn't sound like an Orthodox name.
No. So they do. This wasn't through Shabbat meals. These were more. Now at this point, we graduated from Shabbat meals to more networking events and meeting people and asking people advice. And ultimately, even just from, interestingly enough, I got a decent amount of doors open from doing reference checks on VCs. They would introduce me to CEOs, and I'd become friends with them, and they would introduce me to more people that they think I should connect with. And so that was actually—
Talk about that for a sec. Go through that whole loop and cycle, and in a way maybe that someone else could try and replicate that playbook, because I think that's really interesting.
So referring specifically to like founder intros.
Yeah. So you would be talking to a VC. You tell this VC, I want to do a reference check. Can you give me the names of 3 or 4 founders invested? And you start calling them, and then maybe is that how it works? So
I mean, that wasn't the game plan. I would say I was looking for references, and just because I mean, I wasn't blind to the idea that whoever we'd be partnering up with, we'd be having a partnership, hopefully longer than most marriages in America. And so. And so that was actually something that was deeply important to me, to talk to founders and what their relationship was with the fund. And so they would introduce me to 2 or 3 founders that they invested in. I would talk to them for quite a while. And there's a strong, I would say, camaraderie, founder to founder sort of conversation that you have that's pretty authentic and transparent. And throughout that, I would develop these relationships, and they would introduce me to other people that I should talk to with maybe more similar business models. And ultimately, I wouldn't end a conversation without making sure that there's a way for me to expand my network with them, I would say, especially coming from where I did, where there wasn't much of a network. Would
it be as simple as, at the end of the coffee or Zoom or whatever, just asking for 2 or 3 other people they could introduce you to or connect you with? Simple as that?
Yeah. I mean, I would I would definitely have a lot of questions. And so generally, if it would either lead towards, okay, I actually know somebody that can probably help you more with these specific questions. If it didn't, it would end with, hey, I'm in town actually for the next week or so. If there's anyone else you think I should meet while I'm down here, I would really appreciate it. And then there's always somebody that's that came from that.
Yeah. No, I like it. Cool. And then you have a newer round. Want to talk about, is it Series B after that or what?
Yeah. So we raised 10 million. We built out the team. We went from 2 people to 30 people. And then we continued to grow pretty quickly. And then we decided after this past summer that we would go out and raise again for two reasons. The reason we decided to raise again, one was from the start, pools were not the vision. Like, we're not really passionate about getting people wet per se, as much as we are like making people's lives bigger and larger and turning these like underutilized assets into these joy driving, money creating spaces. And so we wanted to, we already saw the tremendous product market fit. We began to understand the levers of the business, and we wanted to immediately take what we understood from this hourly consumer behavior to start expanding that into other verticals. So tennis courts, large backyards, basketball courts, home gyms. And so we wanted to begin moving in that direction. And also we started facing similar issues to what Airbnb and Uber faced in the early days and still face with regulatory I guess you would say feedback. And so townships would start trying to regulate us. And so beginning to develop a team to combat that and begin developing partnerships and communicating with them would require its own organization. And so we decided to raise again. And this round mainly came from those high net worth, those high value, I guess, angels, you would say, that joined us in the Series A. And so they, at this point, I had good relationships with every one of them. And so they all understood the business pretty deeply, just because of how often I would drive them crazy. And so when it came down to raising, it was this instant like alignment around our needs. And so they were able to do these really warm intros. And so we closed this next round pretty quickly. We actually just signed, we signed that term sheet like a month ago, and we just closed it recently. And so there's that entire process took like 3 weeks for us, just because we had that really meaningful leg in with and with previous founders.
So is it all so Series B? How much was it? And was it all angels and no VCs in Series B?
The introductions came from the angels. It was all VCs.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So it was all VCs, but we were able to skip a lot of steps because we wanted to move really fast. And when we had the founder of Poshmark vouch for both myself and business and where it was, we were able to move really quickly. And so almost every conversation we had at the Series B came from an angel that was already invested in the company or from an earlier VC.
That makes sense. How much and who led it?
So we raised 30 million and it was led by Mayfield Ventures. They were the ones that led actually the first check in Poshmark, as well as the Series A for Lyft. And so they understood a lot of our challenges. They understood our journey. Obviously we're really close with my mentor at the time, who still is. And so there's a lot of instant synergy and connection that we're able to just connect over in record time. And so we're able to move that forward. We have following, the round is followed on by GGV.
Okay.
And Ensemble Ventures.
Who was that last one?
What was that? Ensemble Ventures.
Ensemble. Okay.
They're based out of Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah. And then obviously follow on from our original funds, Norwest Ventures and Trust Ventures. And Trust Ventures is actually a regulatory fund. So their whole value add to founders is that they have an in-house regulatory team that can help you navigate. And from the get-go, we knew that was going to be something we're going to have to deal with. And so we partnered up with them at the Series A. And,
interesting. That's what their whole thing is. They invest in regulated, or companies are going to face regulation, basically.
Exactly.
Very interesting focus. Smart. Did you, for this Series B, did you run a process or run an auction, talk to a lot of investors, or was it just ones that your angels kind of shepherd you toward, which,
So funny enough on that end. So we don't, I think they're calling this, I believe they're going to call this one like the A+ round.
Okay.
Because it's such close proximity to the A. It doesn't really matter in today's world. So I'm yet to see what they're actually going to put out there. But I think they're probably not going to call this the B, just because as a company, we were 2 people 10 months ago. Yeah. And so we're probably more going to name it after where the company is architecturally over the amount of money that we raised. And I think we're going to do that just as just a sake of transparency as far as the company's age. with us, we did make a plan. We got together with our lead partner, the Series A, and we did develop a more methodical plan for how we were going to go about pitching. And then it just kind of totally man plans and God laughs. Because we had this plan, and it was pretty, like, I would say, intelligent, and we had a lot of meetings about who we're going to talk to in what order. And then one of the first VCs was pretty much just started giving us terms like 6 minutes into the conversation, and just the entire thing. And then everything just kind of like it was a good problem to have. We had to like deal with how we had all these people that we planned on talking to, and now we don't have the time. And so how do we squeeze it all in? And so it was had its own set of arrangement situations, but we did go out with a plan. We definitely did spend a lot of time making a schedule, quote unquote.
Interesting. I like that. Man plans, God laughs. Is that a Talmudic saying somewhere, or is it just?
It must be.
It's gotta be. I learned a word yesterday. I was reading an article about raising capital for venture funds. Kushia.
What? I don't even know. Is that Hebrew? I don't.
It is, and I'm probably not even saying it right. It's a Hebrew word with no English equivalent. It's a kind of a difficult question based on an understanding.
Oh, a kasha.
Okay,
kasha. It just means like I don't know why it doesn't have an English equivalent. I would say it just means question. It just means a good question, but with a good, like, well-informed question, right? And it's a good question, but the intent of the question isn't really an answer. It's more like, this is why. No, it's like a question. It's a question followed with a verdict in one.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like you've used. Like you were saying, you've come to a lot of these meetings and networking with questions, which then lead to networking. I just kind of putting this all in my brain together. Really good. And then, so I guess this will be to expand into, like you said, other categories, tennis courts. Are you already starting to get into these other markets, or that's the plan?
Yes. I mean, so we had a landing page just to test out whether people are interested, how interested they would be and what they'd be interested in. And ultimately what we're focusing on is specifically space that brings people joy. And our thesis is that every passion needs a space. And so that's kind of what we want to solve for. We want to take people's passions and put them where they can actually flourish and be nurtured, whether the passion is gathering or playing or competing or anything. That's where we want to find you a home by the hour, ultimately, for that passion. And so we're never going to get into conventional utilitarian use cases, parking or accommodations or stuff like that. We're always going to remain based on people's passions. And we put up a waiting list to see what people would be interested in. And we had a few thousand people sign up for it just through Swimply. And so now we're beginning to launch it market by market. Los Angeles is going to be the first place that you'll be able to escape locally in other spaces that are not necessarily aquatic.
Here's my tip for you. You can take it or leave it, but get into pickleball courts.
Dude, you have no idea. I was just discussing that with the team today, because for the wait list, they only had tennis as an option. And I'm like, we got to add that option there. And they're like, how big is it now? And I'm like, guys, it's telling you it's skyrocketing. We had this whole conversation literally this morning about adding that as an option for people to list and sign up for. So
it's huge. It's supposedly the fastest growing sport in the United States. I just played 2.5 hours this morning, 3 hours yesterday. My legs are cramping as I'm interviewing you. And apparently like Kim, I think it was Kim Kardashian, like even celebrities in LA where you are building pickleball courts on their homes. So if I could go rent out, Kim Kardashian's pickleball court for an hour or two, how much fun would that be? Like I'd pay a lot for that. So
anyway. I'll try to hook you up. I'll see if I can pull some strings.
Yeah. Very cool. I won't keep you much longer. Question I'd love to ask everyone, if you could kind of rewind the clock and give your younger self some advice, either about raising capital or just getting the startup going, what would that be? Or just any other just general advice or tips for, founders that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest thing that I would have done differently is I probably would have launched with a technical co-founder. that would have saved. Like it's not really a nice to have as much as it's, I would say should have been a prerequisite for us. So that's definitely, we're still paying the price for that. And so what I wouldn't do differently actually, and what I actually tell as many people as I can is, this may sound a bit controversial, but like for me, ignorance was incredibly bliss because it was so difficult. Like this entire journey, like we're obviously summarizing it pretty quickly, but there were a lot of like no's and rejections, even just to get started. When I knocked on those 80 doors, there were 76 people that slammed their door in my face and called me a maniac or whatnot. And there was like, if I would have known everything that it would have taken to get to where we are today, I doubt I ever would have gotten started. And even getting to step one, if I knew everything that like it took to get to step 2 and step 3, I don't think I ever would have done. And I kind of was just learning like crazy and constantly asking questions, just nonstop asking questions, getting more conversations with people that were smarter than me, that I respected, and that I can just dive deep into with, getting them on the same side of the table as me, and then just being able to bring support. Like, I was learning things just as far as my headlights led me. And that's ultimately, that it wasn't planned. That was just me not knowing anything whatsoever about starting a business. But I would hope that if I were to start it, I almost feel like my next company is almost going to be harder just because of everything that I know today. Obviously, hopefully I make a lot less mistakes, but it is such an incredibly difficult journey that like figuring out just what you need to know now to move forward was so powerful for me retroactively. Yeah.
Interesting. Excellent. If people want to learn more, it's swimply.com, right?
Yeah. SWIMPLY.
And what markets are you in? Are you pretty all over the US already, or where are you in?
Yeah, we're in like 120 different cities. We have grown mainly organically still so far. And so we are available everywhere that has a swimming pool. Where our biggest markets are that we're more concentrated in is like Los Angeles, the New York metro area, Austin, Texas, and Portland, actually. So that's where we're putting more of a focus on.
Yeah. Cool. Anything you want to plug? You mentioned you're hiring. Anything you want to kind of give a shout out? Or
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously we're very excited as we enter this next phase for Swimply, and we're just looking to build a fire team filled with rock stars that are looking to like change the world and bring happiness to more communities. So we're hiring pretty much across the board, from engineering to growth, to operations and sales, where you can be reached on our career page at swimply.com/careers.
Okay. Yeah. Did you keep I'm just curious, did you keep the Ukrainian development team, or did you like move to an in-house team afterward?
We slowly phased them out.
Yeah.
So we kept them, and then as we hired more engineers, we fired one of theirs until we can move them out.
Excellent. But this is fun. I need to check this out with my kids this summer. I should have discovered you guys sooner, because this is perfect. And again, once you get into pickleball courts, I'm your most loyal customer. I'll be all over this. So.
All right, that's amazing, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, thanks. And we'll catch you after your next round, whatever that is, and see how the story has evolved. How about that?
Yeah, incredible. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Over now.